everyone. You know, I purchased this Nikon Z6ii camera a few weeks ago and been taking it out to do some night sky pictures. So far, I've been very impressed. I'm Charles. I live here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I enjoy taking astro and Milky Way pictures with just a camera, a tripod, and a star tracker. Like many people, I got started in astrophotography because I saw some nice images of the Milky Way and the comet Neowise on the internet, and I thought I'd like to take a few of those pictures and post them on Facebook, on the internet, send them to friends and family, maybe print out a few pictures and put them in my office. However, like many people, I live in the suburbs and we have light polluted skies here in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't live on the West Coast. I don't live in the desert. I don't live in Colorado or Utah. I want to be able to take some nice pictures of the Milky Way in the night skies near Atlanta. And so what I found is if you drive about an hour or two outside of Atlanta, either north or east of Atlanta, you'll hit some dark skies where you can take some nice pictures of the Milky Way. So about a year ago, when the comet Neowise was flying over the US, I decided to take my little Nikon D5600 crop sensor camera and kit lens and drive out about an hour or two east of Atlanta. I joined the Atlanta Astronomy Club, I joined the Deer Lick Village Astronomy Field Club, and met a lot of astrophotographers and astronomers who really helped me and showed me what the right equipment and techniques were to do. I also spent hundreds of hours on the internet taking classes, watching YouTube videos from people like Nick Page, Dave Morrows, Astro Backyard, Trevor, and these people have some wonderful YouTube videos that I highly recommend you watch, and also spend a little money and take some of their classes. They'll save you a lot of time learning how to take really good high quality pictures and processing those pictures. Now my first pictures of the comet and the Milky Way really weren't that great. They were okay, but they were my first pictures. I used my Nikon camera and a kit lens, and so I went back onto YouTube, took some lessons, researched some better equipment, some better techniques, learned how to use Photoshop and Lightroom, and spent a lot of time really just learning how to post-process those kinds of pictures to make them much better quality that you would see on the internet. So today I'd like to show you a little bit about the equipment that I use, talk about the Z6ii, and then talk about a few lenses that I would recommend that you consider using when the Milky Way comes back in the springtime, or if you want to just take some general wide-angle night sky pictures throughout the winter. Here's Domino. He's my helper. He's a poodle. He loves taking astro pictures too with me. Hey Domino, give me a high five. Good boy. After a fair amount of research, I found 3 tripods that I found to be helpful. The first one is a Neewer N55C on Amazon. I usually use that with my crop sensor Nikon D5600 camera, and also keep a little mount on top of the tripod for my phone. Next, I've got the little Joby tripod, and I've got a heavier duty Z6ii tripod with a Benro ball head. I found this is real helpful. It's heavy duty. You can put up to 33 pounds on this tripod, and I use it for my Star Adventurer. This is a bag, inexpensive bag that I purchased at Harbor Freight to keep the Star Adventurer Pro star tracker. And the nice thing about it is if you keep the foam from the original packaging, it works out great because you can store all the pieces of the Star Adventurer and just zip it up and put it in the car and take it with you, nice and portable. The next piece of equipment that I use to organize all my camera equipment and lenses is my backpack. I use a Lowepro BP 350. I found this backpack to be the perfect size. It's not too big, not too small. It's got a hard shell, and it keeps all my gear in it. It keeps my lenses, my ND filters. I've got a laser pointer for at night, which helps with the polar aligning.
I keep my lens pen and lens cleaning. I got my headlamps in here and keep the camera, my intervalometer, and the FTZ adapter. So this is the perfect size to keep everything in it, keeps it organized, doesn't make a mess, and it's nice and easy to put on and throw in the car when you're ready to go out hiking.
So let me show you my typical setup. This is a Skywatcher Star Adventurer Pro star tracker, and I've got it sitting on a pretty heavy duty tripod. The tripod is made by Z6ii. It's the AM284. I bought that on Amazon, and I have the Skywatcher Adventure Pro star tracker attached to it with the Nikon Z6ii camera sitting on a Benro ball head that I also purchased on Amazon. The Z6ii with some of the lenses, the Z lenses, is light enough that you don't really need to attach the weights to the Star Adventurer Pro that you would if you were using a heavier telescope. In this case, I've got the Nikon Z 20mm lens attached to the camera, and what's nice is that it's light enough that it doesn't really affect the star tracking in this little tracker, and it takes pretty good pictures of the stars in focus. So when you first turn on the camera, it'll set the focus to infinity, which is a big help. It gets you in the ballpark for stars. For other scenery, landscape photography, it'll get you spot on. And what's nice is it has a little LCD screen that adjusts up and down depending on the angle that you're standing at. Now, if you don't want to use a star tracker, you can just put this camera on a tripod, and because it's a wide-angle lens, you can minimize the effects of the stars moving in the sky by using the NPF rule or the rule of 500, depending on the focal length of your lens. All right, we're back. Welcome to my office. We're going to go ahead and review some of the lenses, the wide-angle lenses that I've used for the Nikon Z cameras, and I think you'll be impressed with these. Each of them have pros and cons. There is no perfect lens, but we're going to take a look at first we'll look at the 20mm Z lens from Nikon. It's a nice little lightweight small lens. We're also going to look at the Rokinon 14mm lens, and then we'll look at the Sigma 14 to 24mm lens. Let's review a little bit the features of the Nikon Z 20mm lens. So the price of the Nikon lens is $946. It's also the first 20mm lens that Nikon made for the Z system. Incidentally, that price, I believe it's the same price on B&H Photo and Amazon. It has pretty good optics. It takes a 77mm standard filter, which is nice, so you can use this lens during the day. For general landscape photography also, you can use it with a circular polarizer or some ND filters, so it has other uses besides night sky photography. It has a pretty good fast aperture at 1.8 and allows you to stop down further if you want to get less coma and vignetting in your night sky pictures. It also has a switch on the lens that makes it easy to switch between manual and autofocus. Of course, you can do this on the camera also through the menus, but the lens makes it easier to access. It's also lightweight. It only weighs 1.1 pounds, so it's nice and easy to carry around. It fits, keeps your camera light, and it fits in your bag easily. What I didn't like about it was the aperture is limited to f/16, so you can't get much higher than that, although during the daytime, it's very infrequent that you would use any aperture smaller than f/16. Also, there's no focus scale on the lens, so it's hard to find out when you get to infinity, and there is no hard stop when you're focusing. It has a focus by wire system, which is an electronic system, rather than feeling it with your hand when you focus. So it is hard, somewhat difficult to get a precise focus on the stars. I felt like the stars were just never perfectly pin sharp. But I did find that the Nikon kept the color of the sky pretty accurate. It was either dark blue or black. But of course, if you're shooting in RAW, then it won't really matter. Okay, let's take a look at the Rokinon 14mm lens. This is a nice lens. It's smaller than both the Sigma lens and some other Nikon 14 to 24mm lens. It is a little bigger and heavier than the Nikon Z lens though. All right, so the current price of the Rokinon Special 14mm lens is $729. It is a little more expensive than the f2.8 lens. However, it's lighter than the Sigma 14 to 24mm lens, and it's also slightly smaller. It weighs about 1.5 pounds. It's faster than the 2.8 Rokinon lens, and it does have less chroma and distortion than the f2.8. It also has better color than the f2.8, since it doesn't show as much of those, giving you the light brown color cast in the skies that the 2.8 does. It's also a little better made, it's heavier, has an exposure chip, so it works with the Nikon cameras. And the other thing I liked about it was it has a large manual focus ring, which makes it much easier to focus at night, and it's also very smooth. What I didn't like about it was you can't remove the hood for the storage. If you want to put it in your camera bag, it does take a little wider space. And also because it is wide, it doesn't take your standard filters. So you can't use it during the day with a standard circular polarizer or ND filter. You're going to have to get the larger square filters. The infinity stop on the focus ring was not exactly at infinity, so you got to be really careful at night. I found if you turn it to the right by about 1/4 of an inch, then you get to infinity. It's also big, but it does fit in your camera bag. And the other thing is you will need the FTZ adapter for this. So because it's very tight on that adapter when you put it on, you want to make sure you put it on the adapter and put it on your camera before you put the camera on your tripod. And I've learned this the hard way, because if you try putting it on the adapter while the camera's on the tripod, it messes up your polar alignment if you're using a star tracker, and then you have to repolar align the star tracker. So my advice is put it on the adapter, put it on the camera, get the camera on the tripod after you've done everything. All right, let's take a look at the Sigma lens. The Sigma 14 to 24mm lens, f2.8. Let me show you a picture of that. So that's this lens here. You can see it's got a focus switch between auto and manual on this, and it does have a focus meter on it, which is nice. And it does have 2 different rings, which we'll talk about in a second. So the price of this lens, I noticed it did drop about $100 this week on Amazon. The current price is $1,106. On B&H Photo, it's still $11.99. What I liked about the lens, it's a very solid feel, it's well made, it's easy to focus, and you can adjust the focal length because you do have 2 separate rings. So at night, you can feel the difference between the 2 rings. Also, it does have a focal length meter, and I do wish the Nikon Z lens had that too, to enable you to see when you're getting close to infinity. It does have a fast aperture, and I found it to be one of the best quality wide-angle lenses, and it is a lot cheaper than the Nikon 14 to 24mm lens, and it's also less than half the price of the new Nikon Z 14 24mm lens, which costs about $2,400. What I didn't like about it was that it is big and heavy. It weighs 2.5 pounds. It was hard to fit in the camera bag because it is pretty big. So it comes with its own travel bag. The other thing is when you put it on the tripod, you really have to tighten the ball head because it's so heavy, so the lens doesn't start sagging. And this is tough at night to do, to notice if your lens is sagging, and you may not notice it until it's too late and you get your pictures back. So make sure you really tighten up the tripod. I don't really see myself carrying this lens during the day, on my neck all day when I go hiking and traveling. If you take the lens, the adapter, and the camera, they weigh 4 to 5 pounds. So I would not use this for traveling. I would just use this if you don't plan on hiking and you're real close to your photography site. You will need an FTZ adapter for this. And again, like the Rokinon lens, I found it to be a bit of a pain to use. Just because it's very tight on that adapter and it can throw off your star tracker. So make sure, like the Rokinon lens, that you do put this on your camera on the tripod before you use the star tracker. Also, let's go back here. I did find, because it is so big, it's hard to find filters that work with this. You're not going to be able to use the circular polarizer or the ND filters at night. You've got to get those big, expensive square filters. And I just wish the lens companies could figure out a way to make a wide-angle lens that's good for both night and daytime photography, because I really don't want to be spending $1,000 on a lens just to use for night photography, especially as an amateur or a hobbyist. And I find that most people, they don't want to be schlepping these big, heavy lenses and also have to carry the huge filters when they travel. So that is a limitation on this lens, but it is a good quality lens. Another lens I do want to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to show you this lens. This is a Rokinon 16mm lens. It's very small, it's lightweight, it's f2, so it's a very fast lens. And this lens is actually made for crop sensor cameras. This one is made for the Nikon DX camera. I use it on a D5600 Nikon. And what I liked about this lens was that it does take pretty good pictures. It does have some color casting on it. It makes the skies kind of light brown. I do use this on the Nikon Z camera also. It's only $300. But it does have some vignetting, and it does have some coma and astigmatism in the stars. But other than that, it does fit in your camera bag. It's really light, and it's a good lens to take a look at also. But it is made for the DX cameras, so you would have to use this in the crop sensor mode on your Nikon. I did want to show you the iPhone 12 Pro Max that I purchased a few weeks ago. It has 3 lenses, and it actually does take pretty decent pictures of the Milky Way in the night sky. Not professional, but it is pretty good. Let's take a look at some of the pros and cons of this. So the iPhone 12 Pro Max sells for $1,099. It's a new phone from Apple. It has a wide-angle lens, 13mm f2.4. Has a 52mm lens at f1.6, and it has a telephoto lens at f2.4. And I thought the night mode on the camera was pretty good. It has built-in noise reduction, and the noise reduction is okay. It's not perfect, but it does do a decent job. Later on, I'll show you some of the pictures from the Orion constellation and the Orion Nebula that I took with it. What I liked about it was it is much lighter than the Z camera with its lenses, and the phone fits in your pocket. I would say this phone is good for people that just want to take a few pictures of the Milky Way and night sky constellations, and that may be all you really need to rather than buying all this other the other cameras and lenses. It does have a night mode, which can take up to 30-second exposures, And the night mode also is able to capture the Milky Way and the Orion Nebula. I would say it's okay if you're going to use those pictures for Facebook and Instagram, or you're just texting friends with it. It does have the image stabilization, and I was able to take pictures of the night sky handheld, but I would say a tripod is definitely better to use. If you do want to get some better quality pictures, then I would go ahead, I would recommend taking 20 or 30 pictures of the sky and then stack them in your software, and you should be able to get better quality pictures. The other thing to keep in mind is this iPhone. It is expensive at $1,100, but in comparison to a Nikon Z camera with the lenses, you're going to be spending $4,000 to $5,000 on that. So if you're just looking to take some casual pictures of the night sky and post them on social media, you could save yourself a couple of $1,000s and just use the iPhone. And I'll show you some pictures of the Orion in a moment. All right, so let's take a look at some of the pictures that I took a few nights ago of the Orion constellation. The first picture was taken with the iPhone, and you can see in the information it was taken, the phone took it for 1 second at f1.6 with an ISO of 8,000. If we zoom in on this picture, you can see that it did reduce a lot of the noise. It's not perfect, but when you zoom in, the stars are in good focus. There's not much coma on the sides. And it was able to take, a reasonably good picture of the night sky. Second picture, I did take it for a little longer using the telephoto lens. It took the picture for 3 seconds at f1.6, and the camera gave it an ISO of 5,000. You can see the Orion constellation and the Orion Nebula. Here, if we zoom in a little bit, it did capture some of the nebula with a little bit of either coma, or I guess since it wasn't on a star tracker, you can see some of the star trails on it. But overall, for a small sensor, it did a good job. I would just not zoom in on it, and these pictures are good enough to send to friends probably, or post them on Facebook. All right, so this picture was taken with the Nikon 20mm lens for 15 seconds at f1.8. The coloring of the sky is pretty good. Incidentally, these pictures are unedited. These are straight from the camera. If we zoom in a little closer, the stars are in pretty good focus in the center. You can see the Orion Nebula. If I move outwards towards the corners, we do start to get a little bit of vignetting at f1.8, but overall the quality of the stars is pretty good. Not much coma, very little. I don't see really much astigmatism, so this lens is pretty good at wide open at f1.8. If we zoom out, you can see a little bit of the coma in the corners here, but overall not bad. If we stop down the 20mm lens to f2.8, the vignetting goes down, and if we zoom in, you'll notice while the stars are still in focus in the center, you still have the Orion Nebula showing, and again, this is unprocessed. The coma is very little. I don't see any astigmatism. I don't see any coma on the stars in the corners here. If we move to the other corner, very similar result. Again, not much coma, very little astigmatism. Does a nice job. That's the Nikon 20mm lens, the Z 20mm. All right, this is the Nikon 20mm lens where I increased the ISO to 3200. Previously it was at 2000 and 1600. Now it's at 3200. Overall, the noise still isn't too bad. You can see some noise over here as you move around, but a lot of that noise can be removed in post-processing. So this was at ISO 3200 for 20 seconds. If we look at the Rokinon lens, this is the 14mm at f2.4. We do have a little bit of vignetting on the sides here, so you will have to deal with that in post-processing. And if we zoom in, you can see the Orion Nebula on that. And if we look at the corners here, you will notice that there is some astigmatism and coma in the stars. I'll zoom in a little more so you can see that. So there is some astigmatism, more than the Nikon. As we get closer to the center, of course, these stars look much better. If we go to the other corner, you'll see the coma and some astigmatism of the stars does appear with this Rokinon lens. If you're not going to pixel peep, then of course it really doesn't matter. This is a very good lens that would make your pictures turn out real nice. If we stop down to f2.8, you'll notice we still have some vignetting on the sides here. This was taken at ISO 3200, and let's see if we got rid of some of the coma. So the center stars look pretty good on this 14mm at f2.8. However, we do still have the astigmatism of the stars even at f2.8, so you may need to go to f4. If you're using a star tracker, it really doesn't matter. You can put it at f4 and just take the shot at 30-second duration instead, and probably get rid of a lot of this astigmatism. So my recommendation is use this lens with a star tracker. Here is the Sigma 14 to 24mm picture. This was taken at 14mm at f2.8 for 20 seconds, ISO 2000. The vignetting is not too bad in the corners. There is some, but overall not so bad. You can still see the constellation and the nebula. The stars appear sharp in the center. We move towards the ends, the corners. You do see some astigmatism at 14mm, stopped at f2.8. So there is some astigmatism here and some coma. If we move towards, as we move towards the center, you'll see the stars lose that coma and become more circular. But in the upper parts of this picture, you do see some coma and astigmatism in the corners and the top portion of the lens, of the picture. And this is at the 24 millimeter focal length of the Sigma. Again, pretty good at taking pinpoint stars in the middle. It does capture the Orion Nebula, and it does have some noise at ISO 3200, which can be removed or reduced in post-processing. As we move towards the corners of this picture, we still have some astigmatism, we still have a little bit of coma. The stars are still, they're not pinpoint sharp, even on this lens. Slightly better than the Rokinon, but not much. As we move towards the center, you can see the stars become more round again. And as we move towards the left side, the astigmatism comes back. Overall though, still a pretty good picture. Again, this is unprocessed. This is straight from the camera. Okay, so people have asked me, what's your favorite lens? Which one are you going to keep? So we've got the Nikon, the Sigma, and the Rokinon. Of these lenses, I'm probably going to send back the Sigma. It's just too big and heavy. It does take decent pictures, but I'm pretty happy with this 20 millimeter, the Z lens. I think it takes really good pictures. It's nice and light. I can fit it in my camera bag. Very professional looking. The Rokinon, I'm going to keep this one also. It's good for the 14 millimeter, and it's also fairly light. I can fit it in my camera bag, and I can take it with me when I go hiking. So I'll just have to remember to use the FTZ adapter with the Rokinon lens. That's it for today. Hope you enjoyed watching this. If you have any questions, feel free to send me some comments. And if you have other lenses you want to take a look at, like the new Z 14 to 24 millimeter lens, let me know if you'd like to see that. I'll go ahead and get that and take some pictures at night, and we'll compare that to some of these lenses. Thanks so much.